My name is Don Stott. I am a father who experienced estrangement from one of my adult children firsthand. Welcome to Beyond the Pain, a place where parents of estranged adult children can find peace and healing. In each episode, I hope to share stories that'll help you through some of your darkest hours. To bring this out of the shadows and stop being ashamed. Then to build you up and inspire you to love yourselves even more. Hello, I want to start by reminding you that I am not a therapist or a doctor. I'm just a guy who's been there and wants to help you have a life past our estranged children. If you need mental help coping with this or have thoughts of hurting yourself or someone else, please seek professional help. Today we're going to discuss the 7 stages of grief. I believe this needs to be brought out into the open and out of the shadows. We need to discuss and demystify the 7 stages of grief. You might be thinking, isn't grief when you lose someone in death? Not always. If you think about our loss, in some instances, it is like a death. It is important to remember just because you've gone through one stage doesn't mean you will not revisit it later. Also, not everyone goes through them all, or in a particular order. Depending on where you look or who you talk to, there are many variations of each name and the order in which they come. So there's really no right or wrong way to deal with them. It is a very personal story and very personal way to deal with them. I am here to tell you it's okay to feel these emotions. Some you will have more trouble with than others. I know I did. So let's start with shock and disbelief. That is probably all of our first reactions, I would imagine. I know it was mine. It was difficult to imagine that this was happening to me. As I've said in my previous recording, it was very difficult to know it was happening. Like it says, I was in shock. That goes through many different emotions. That shock. You might not feel anything. Which might make you feel weird. This is my child. Why can't I feel something? That's not necessarily anything wrong. You might feel a lot. And that's okay. Everyone has to deal with it in their own certain way. Like I said before, there's really no right or wrong way as long as you're not hurting yourself or hurting someone else. You kind of have to go through this process. It's difficult. It is very difficult. There will be days that you're in such shock that you just don't want to move and get out of bed or do anything. And you know what? That's okay. It's a difficult thing. We have to go through it in our own way. And sometimes it's just about napping. Sometimes it's about curling up and, if you're the kind of person that needs a good cry to get it out, I know sometimes I am, believe it or not. Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you might need to take other approaches, it's just all a very personal thing, and it just depends on how you want to deal with it. But the key is dealing with it, I think, in my personal opinion. If you don't deal with it, it's always going to be there. Not to say that, you know, like I said before, not to say you won't revisit these, because you're going to have times that you might try something. You might try to reach out to them, and get slapped in the face and it starts all over again. So, don't be surprised at that. If you're the kind of person that needs someone to talk to, find someone to talk to, whether it's a professional or someone who's going through it. There are lots of places out there. So just, dealing with it is I think the most important thing. Just not letting it sit. The next, there's denial. It's really hard, especially when you have people in your life that know all of your kids. They hang out with you all the time. You talk often, whatever the case may be. It's hard to admit sometimes that there's something wrong. You might someone ask you, "Oh, I'm fine. We're good, whatever," and really not wanting to put it out there. Not that you have to tell everybody everything, but, you just don't want to admit that there's something wrong. Because then that kind of makes it really real. Then people will start judging and people will start questioning, and you don't have the answers. There's no way for you to deal with that if you don't know what the answers are. So, you might have a best friend that you've had all of your entire life and they know all of your, good, bad, and ugly. But this is different. This is not, I cheated on an exam when I was in college. This is not, I got too drunk one time to, know what I was doing and I made some bad choices. This is very personal. So it's really, really hard to admit that to people. I know for me, when I first started going through it, as I've said before, my work slacked off. I couldn't function very well at my work, and it was noticed. I literally broke down just about in a room full of people, crying during that time because I made a stupid mistake at work, and my boss called me on it, and she had the foresight to clear the room so we could have a conversation. But but it was tough. So denial. So denial is the stage, definitely. And again, you may course through this stage, or you may skip this stage, but you may go through it, and then something might trigger something, and you deal with it again later, or it come up again later. So, don't be too hard on yourself, and don't be surprised, because I just think that you continue to revisit and revisit and revisit these things. So the next one is a tough one. It's for some people. For some people, it's very easy. But for me, it was kind of difficult at first. It's anger. And, it may not be what you're thinking. It may not be all anger at one person. It may not be all anger at your estranged child or your estranged child's spouse, or, your ex who is influencing your estranged child. I mean, it could be all of those, or it could be none of those. It could just be angry, and it could be at yourself. And if there's some reason that you are angry at yourself, okay, that's okay. I just say in my experience, yes, I was angry with myself. I did some things in the beginning of this that, weren't kosher, because I was angry and I was hurt, but there's also nothing wrong with placing the anger at your estranged children, because especially if you have no idea what's going on, what else? In my instance, I had no idea, so what else was I to do? To examine everything and to get upset, to allow myself to be angry. It was almost though like I was betraying them, my son, but that's not really what it is. I know there are children, we love them, and we do. We love them even when they hurt us, but being able to show that emotion, that anger when it's necessary, as long as it's not a violent anger, they do something stupid or they do this to us, for no reason, or at least not telling us the reason. I think it's pretty natural to be angry and, healthy in a sense, especially if you handle it the right way. There are places you can go to break stuff in a safe environment. There are resources. There are, some people go to be working out and do it just angrily, Some people play a sport, Some people, it might be going to one of these rage rooms or whatever and just break china, break computer parts, break this, that, and everything, I personally think that's probably a very therapeutic thing for someone, to just let out in a safe way all of the yuck. So anger is a real tough one, but I think it's really, really important to let it out and to let it go, in a safe way. And then some people, it's just talking about being angry to your therapist or to a group of people that understand, or anything, or writing a letter, even if it goes nowhere, writing a letter, burn it. Some people say that when you do that, it releases it out into the universe and, you're done with it. If you subscribe to that, then do that. Some people, it might be a spiritual thing, your priest or your rabbi or whatever, talk to them, so there's no right and wrong way. It's you, whatever you feel like you need to do with it in a safe and legal and productive way. But I just don't think there's any wrong or right way. So, but you have to deal with it. Many people of much older generations, that wasn't something they would do. They would just not ever talk about anything, and I just don't think that's healthy. So I think that's anger. We've all felt it, I'm pretty sure, even if it's not red hot heat anger, I think we've all felt some anger over this, and that's okay. So that's my 2 cents on anger. Then you get to bargaining. Bargaining is like you want to make a deal with someone, God, the universe, your children, whatever. If you'll just come back, or if you'll just let them come back, I'll change. I'll do different. I'll whatever. And I just don't know that really works. I mean, I'm not saying prayer doesn't work. I'm not saying if you believe in any higher power, that doesn't work. I'm just saying to the kids, you can't bargain with them. It's like, yes, you can listen to them. You can hear what they have to say. You can admit fault where there is, and I think you should. If there's something you did, even if you didn't know it, in my case, I didn't know what started the whole thing, what triggered things, so when I found out 2.5 years later, then I'm like, yes, I had no idea, but I am really sorry that happened, um, and, but as far as bargaining with the children anyway, I just I don't know that really will work. So, and in those stages, you'll do just about anything to make this stop, but until they're ready, and some of them may never be, but until they are ready, you can't make it happen. You can't do it all. Has to be a two-way street. That's very difficult, but that is the way it is. So, so that's my take on bargaining. Now, guilt. Guilt is such a useless emotion. I mean, you can regret what you may or may not have done, because again, you probably don't know. I know many of us just don't know. But guilt just eats at you. And it makes life hard, makes life very difficult. You can't change the past. All you can do is move forward. And I know that's a whole lot easier said than done, but that is it. You just can't change the past. Sometimes you have to give yourself space. You have to give them space to want to, be in your lives again, or want you in their lives again. But guilt is just a killer, So again, it's a pretty useless emotion. I've always thought that, you hear that all the time, but I also have always thought that, it's just, you've done something, say, even if you don't know what it is, you've done something. You can't change it. You can only move forward from it. You can only apologize if that's the case that you need to, and change, but guilt again is just completely useless. So I think that's that. Big one here that I know I went through majorly was depression. Majorly for me. I'm usually a pretty happy individual. So going through a depression was different for me. I mean, it was different. I mean, when I was a kid, I went through some depression for some stuff. But I hadn't been that person for a very long time. So when this hit, and after several months, I realized it wasn't going to change, or at least I couldn't do anything to make it change. Then the depression really started setting in. Fortunately, I realized it talking to my wife, and oddly enough, my chiropractor, who had gone through some depression. We shared the same doctor. So, that was helpful. But I realized that, again, I got counseling around that time. I think that was the following year. It's all kind of a blur now. But I sought counseling the first year. Did that for a while. So it was the second year, I believe, that I decided I needed more help. So I went to see my doctor. I got on some antidepressant medication, a couple of different ones. Well, I had a couple of different ones. I didn't use them both. One was a big gun, and the other one was just a little bit to help me, because I just wasn't cutting it. Um, it's depression is profound sadness. It's a pretty natural human reaction to grief and loss, and this was a loss. So, how you deal with the depression, what you do is just depends on you. Some people don't feel depression, or don't know what it feels like, so they don't know how to describe it. So it's a very difficult time. Some people may need to, when they go through depression, they may need to be on medication for years, and that's okay. As long as it's, again, you're not abusing the medication, you're not taking too much, whatever a doctor suggests. Or some people may do well just with counseling, and some people may do well with just distraction. So it just depends on you. I think the theme throughout all of these stages is there's no right or wrong way. Because I do one thing one way doesn't mean you doing it completely differently won't work for you. So the last one is a really, really tough one, and I know many of us are not there. I was fortunate enough to reconcile with my son last year, and things have been well, but the last stage that I'm going to talk about is acceptance and hope. And sometimes that doesn't mean reconciliation. Sometimes that just is going to mean you've accepted it, and acceptance and hope might be two different things, two separate things, You can break these down. So for you might just be in the acceptance stage. Okay, there's in your head, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm not going to sit here and, not live my life because I can't change what's going on. You've accepted that part of it. It doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean you don't love your children. It doesn't mean you don't want it to be different. But at some point, you have to accept it and try to live your life, and then secretly back there in your brain somewhere, I'm sure all of us hope that things will change. Sometimes those two can go together depending on your situation, and sometimes they can't. So that's okay, But again, acceptance doesn't mean you're giving up. It doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean you're a bad parent. It means you're a human being and you've accepted the situation and you need to move forward. And the only way to do that is to go through these stages, sometimes, again, more than one time, but to go through these stages and to, really work through them and to get to a place where you can have a life again. If you don't do that, then, what's the point? When our children are young, we do everything we can for them. We try to give them every advantage. We try to give them our knowledge, even though especially by the teenage years, we don't know anything anymore. And past that, until they get to a certain age, then they might feel like, oh, maybe they did know a little bit of something. So, but we do everything for them, and that's what we should do. We're parents. We chose to be parents. We chose to have these children. We love these children. And it's really hard when it turns around and they, at least apparently, don't feel the same way. And I know somewhere in there, even when I was going through it, I know somewhere in there, it's not that he didn't love us, but it sure was hard to remember that, So, acceptance and hope, like I said, they can go together. or they might be separate depending on your situation. So just know that, one, that you're not the only one. There are so many people out there going through this or something very similar, and you're not an awful parent. You're not a bad person necessarily. Have some of us done some bad things? Absolutely. Unless we knowingly did things that were really awful to them. I'm talking verbal or physical abuse, or, mental abuse or sexual abuse. Obviously, those are different. But unless it's something like that and we just didn't know it was affecting him that way, my wife and I often joke that there's a parent handbook, and, or that's what we told our kids when we were growing up. There's a parent handbook and it says blah, blah, blah. And, we know there really isn't. Making it up as we go along, and unless you were, even if you were treated spectacularly when you were a child, it doesn't mean you're going to know how to deal with your kids, because all of them are different. What works for one won't work for another. My wife and I have three, and each one is a little different. What restrictions and punishments might work for one child absolutely doesn't work for the other ones. So we make it up as we go along. So I think the parting thought with this is, one, work through the stages. Don't be surprised if you go back through some of these stages. Don't be surprised if you skip some of these stages. There's not a way to fit every situation, every round peg into a round hole. It's much like anything in life. You may be the best at one particular thing at your job. Someone else may come in and be terrible at that one particular thing that you're great at, but this other thing over here, they're much better than you are. So, there's no way to, in my opinion, there's no rule book, there's no handbook, there's no way to make sure you're doing everything perfectly. You're not going to do that. Sometimes I think the children that estrange themselves, and even the ones sometimes that don't, expect or think that, you should do things all a certain way, and that if you don't, then you're crazy, or whatever, or you're a bad parent, or you don't care about them, or whatever. And that's just not the case. It's just everybody does things differently. You react differently to different people, to different situations, to everything. So I just don't see that as I don't see that you can make everybody the same and treat everybody exactly the same. It's just not realistic. So go through the stages, skip the ones you don't need, work through them, talk to people, find some help if you need it, and if you care to call in and share your story, I will set that up. You just let me know, and I hope that this has been helpful. We can also delve into them a little more in the coming weeks if need be. They will always come up. They will be recurring themes in our lives. So I hope this was helpful. Be sure to drop me an email at beyondthepainpodcast@gmail.com. Any questions, comments, concerns, and I will see you on the next one.